Hey everybody, welcome to CollectFutbol Live. I think this is episode 14 or 15. Can't remember. I'm here with
Doesn't
Al.
matter.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter. How you doing, Al?
Good yourself, Bill?
Good. Just a lot of stuff going on. We were just talking about it beforehand, and so we do have a lot to talk about today. There's something that kind of you and I wanted to talk about to start this. This Discord, when I started it, I really, was hoping we would get like 10 to 20 people that, like we could all get together and kind of talk vintage. And since the market just went crazy, there's just so many more people that have joined. And, my goal was to like introduce people to vintage that maybe hadn't done vintage and, be able to answer questions. And, I was throwing out deals for people to buy and all that kind of stuff. And super happy to answer questions. But like you and I have been talking in the last month, and it's just become so almost debilitating the amount of questions that we're getting. And
Part-time job.
like it is truly an extra job. And like there was literally a day I had 40 questions in my DMs, and that same day I asked you, and you're like, yeah, I'm spending 2-3 hours talking to people, and it's just crazy. And what's up, Al? What's up, Mitch? Thanks for joining. So we kind of try to figure out how we could kind of change that a little bit. And so we decided we're gonna do a like a premium channel on our Discord, and basically we're gonna charge a monthly fee. It's $20, and basically what you'll end up getting is priority Bill and Al. So essentially, if you ask us a question in there, that's our first priority to answer of any questions that we get. We're also, that's like a private chat with the two of us, and then whoever are also premium members. We're also planning to do like a half-hour show every week that's private just for the members, a Q&A where you guys can pop in, ask questions, and we get to answer the specific questions that you have. And then also, and I think this is probably the biggest perk, it's that if Al or I decide to move something from our portfolio, we will offer it to our premium members before we release it and make it available to the public. So before something goes to auction, just like anything like on eBay, that sort of thing, we'll offer it. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to give you a discount, but you're going to get the opportunity to, acquire that piece before anybody else would. So that's pretty much it. I set it up. I'll share the link in this down below. And so basically it's $20 a month. And then or if you wanted to do a whole year, it's $200. So you're basically getting 2 months for free. So that's pretty much the nuts and bolts. I don't know if you have anything else to add, Al.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not that I think most people know that we've been really helpful. It's just kind of getting to literally an overwhelming amount of questions, and we are happy to help, but there's only so many hours in a day, and it's just gotten to the point where it's just not sustainable at this level. So hopefully, this isn't like we're not a get rich quick scheme. That's really not what it's about. It's more about, hey, kind of respecting our time, because up until now we've been, it's our own fault to a certain extent. We've been very giving with information, and people send me all the time, hey, Cards, what do you think about this? And we do have insight because of our history about how common or uncommon certain things are, what things maybe you may want to stretch on and what things you may not. So We thought about it. We looked around. We saw what some other people, are trying to do. We think that we can, help people. We want to help people,
Yeah.
and we want to expand it, but we also want to, perform in our day jobs and and do our own collecting, as well, instead of just helping others.
Yeah, I mean that's the biggest thing. It's just a time thing, and if I could do this full time, of course I would, but that's just not the way that life is, and you guys are making it a lot harder for us to do that anyway. So,
but
so
we
yeah,
love it.
What's that, Al?
No, I said, but we love it. I mean, we do love,
Absolutely.
helping,
like,
right?
I wouldn't have it any other way. I love the community. Like like I say this all the time. Like, I look forward to going in there, but it just, LB's saying I can only imagine the volume of questions. So, it's crazy. And I just happen to have like a really high volume day. And then I hit up Al that exact same day and he's like, yeah, man. So I don't know if it was the moon or something, but that day was horrible. And, but it's consistent and, like I love it, but like every question, it could be like, hey, what is this? Well, then I end up going and, I'm more efficient searching things, but it still takes time. And I go find a link to show somebody, and it's just like every one of these questions is 5 minutes and, follow-up questions. So anyway, I think, we said what we said. I mean, that's pretty much, we'll see what happens. Like, hopefully, maybe some people just want to do it because we've helped them previously, and it's just something that they want to say thank you. But the biggest thing is kind of to put a barrier up a little bit. So that being said, let's get to what we really wanted to talk about anyway, and that's February of the market. And I'm just gonna kind of give you my initial thoughts with the PWCC last night, kind of a macro. And every month I feel like I'm saying this, but it's just getting broader and broader, like the interest, like the players that people are spending their money on. It's not just Pele, it's not just Diego Maradona, it's I can even include Cruyff now. It's not just Cruyff, and it's that's so promising, right? Because there's just so many more, people are just digging into other players, and that's fantastic. The interesting thing to me is that the Pele's kind of, they weren't overly, we've seen such a high increase every single week, and it just seemed like it kind of flattened a bit. And so we might have, a little bit of a pause and, some consolidation, and hopefully that's the case, right? But that's kind of my first read. What's your kind of macro read of the?
Yeah, certainly the breadth is impressive. And we had talked a little bit about this last month, and I had talked with Vincent about this too. It already had felt like it had stabilized and was healthy across the board. But now it even feels like strong prices, like not just above average prices, like strong prices for any quality player, any quality, football player from, through time at a high rated, relatively high graded, rookie cards are now $1,000. Or more, right? Some like the KDB, that was kind of a shocker to me to see that sticker, go for three grand. I think it was a 9, right? And people have been praising that sticker in the Discord and elsewhere for the last 9 months. And, people have been buying them for raw for 100, 200, 300 bucks. Yeah, there aren't many graded. Although I know a lot are sitting there, but that's just an example, right? So you've got high quality, players are just getting the respect, regardless if they're vintage or modern. And, I think it's the Pele's, I think, definitely pause with some exception. But the run up's been huge, right? So you like I kind of want things to stabilize because ever since that golden auction, it just everything went bananas. Even worse. And so I think that it's better for the market to have this a slower growth, and we've had kind of this huge thing, and this is the very first month in probably 10 years where I sold probably 3 times as much as I bought. Um, there are some overheated, I'm always a fan of taking some money off the table, especially if you have, duplicates and things have run up or things are out of balance and you can trade that into some other things. But another thing that really stood out to me, on the Pele side was that 70, sticker that went for like $7,000.
Yeah.
We've also been singing the praises of that, the rarity, the global reach of that. It was an 8, which I think is pretty high graded for, I don't remember how many there are. So there is maybe some grading premium, but seeing the love for that was interesting. We didn't have a lot of real high end Pele rookies out there. And if you look at the Golden has a PSA 2 with still 10 days to go, that's already at $30,000. So, I don't think that's over. I think for the documentary kind of left me a little, like I wish it was
I agree.
I wish it was a better, a better presentation of the man, a better, more highlights of his playing skill. Cause I just don't feel like you walk away, it's not going to create the Last Dance type vibe at all. Right. And it's just,
I'm not sure it's going to create really any vibe. Like it was such a pure documentary, like almost newsreel type of thing. You know what I mean? It was just such an odd, they made it feel super old school, I guess. And that's not really, I think, what's going to draw a lot of new people into, being interested in him, I don't think.
Yeah. So I mean, this is the first time we get to see a bunch of Messi's, trade after the huge Ronaldo trade, right? So I was a little surprised that the PSA 9, I said, only went for $50,000. But if we're thinking that the PSA 10 Mega Cracks is going to be, 300 or 400, who knows, where that is because it hasn't traded. That feels like the 9, there was some value there. I kind of felt that way, but time's going to tell, where those things shake out. It just is, to a point. Today, I actually thought, I'm like, am I priced out of the market? Right. Like right now, I mean,
I hope not.
Yeah, I hope not. But it was a bizarre feeling. I mean, yeah. I've been on 50 PWCC auctions yesterday and didn't win a thing.
Oh my God.
Right. And again, I'm using maybe the old price, right, as my guide, which has always been, but I'd never not win something. Right. So anyway, I mean, that's kind of my, my thought. I think it's good to see a lot of people, making money and feeling good about the hobby. It's always, those good times are always good, but I do worry if you get in at a really high price on some of these cards, and then there's a bit of a correction, will we see a little bit of the Prism thing where then some people went away forever. Now it's come back with a vengeance, right? But I do worry about that because, when people get burned, they tend not to like their hobby.
Yeah, that's true. That's that's something. It's such an odd feeling because if it does correct, like we're happy for it as collectors, right? Like because we feel like, okay, this gives us a buying opportunity, but at the same time, you're right. There's gonna be a lot of people that, lose a lot of money and they end up just disappearing, and who knows what and then they probably disappear with their inventory. So then we just are like, oh man, we don't even get that. But it's interesting, and I can't believe that you bid that many times, 50 times and didn't win one. So yeah, if you're priced out, I'm in big trouble. But
well, I mean, there wasn't anything there that I was stretching for.
Yeah,
it was more like value. It was like, hey, and I don't think there was anything that I mean, I thought about the Grinch 55, right? It's really nice, really hard to find those unstuck. Great. And I think there's, based on relative to other things, I think there is value in that card. So I do think that's a good buy. I just couldn't quite get myself to go there now with all this rumors about the 53, 54. And maybe it'll, those may end up being like the 57 Pele, just not really practical. And I do think that the 55 is going to be the go-to just because it trades.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Alfia of Garrincha card. So I do think that's going to be there. There is a 6. So there's just a couple factors that kept me off of that, but I love the card and it was a fantastic copy. So I think that was another auction that I really, followed closely, didn't bid seriously after it hit 10, thought it may hit 20, low 20s, but I don't know. What did you think about that one?
Yeah, I mean that's a primo card, right? Like that's one of the elite ones, I think. I agree with you. I think any 53 or 54 is just one of they're so rare and unattainable for most that I think the 55 is it. And that's where we kind of deal with this issue with the rookies and people saying certain things are rookies and certain things aren't. Market's going to decide what, where the value is, and something that's attainable is going to be worth more than, like you were saying this early on, and I wasn't really sure about it, but you were right. Like, the 57, like it's still going to be like a primo piece, but at the same time, like there's only so many people that have the accessibility to it. And like these other ones that trade and are liquid, that is definitely just, there's like added value there. And
the liquidity does bring value. That's the public companies trade at higher multiples than private companies as a general rule. Why? Yeah. Because you can get in and out anytime you want. A private company, you got to hold it. I think that there's always a liquidity premium, and those earlier Grinchas will probably have the same thing the 57 Pele, has. And again, that's a negative for investors, right? And that's what I said on my Pele video. Look, if you're an investor, I'd stick to the Alfia and the Quiggle, the two that the market knows. They see them trade all the time. You need money, you can put listed on eBay, and you're going to get fair offers, within hours probably, right? An ungraded, bizarre thing that nobody's seen. It takes a really special type of collector, to spend the money on something that's just not that well known. So I think the 55, I think that's going to end up being a really good, purchase in the end.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's like the other thing is, a lot of new collectors, they see a PSA 5 and that's not that impressive, right? Like just that. So I almost think that discounted it slightly. And I think that, once people start to realize just the difficulty of getting any of those, 55 Vecchi Idolos, like in decent shape, like everything you see is taken out of albums for the most part. So like you're seeing 1.5s, 2s. You're not seeing these 5s and 6s very much. So this 5 is essentially a 9. Like that is basically like the alpha PSA 9 or PSA 8.5, and so it's just a different. And sometimes people, they still think, okay, well, there's 10 out there, So like, if you're not aware of the population, and you're not all of a sudden going to find a bunch of these in primo condition. So like, this is a top 5%, probably top 1% of those cards. And so, our stickers. So I think that it's truly an elite piece. And I think that, actually a member of our Discord, his brother bought it. So, I think he's going to be very happy with that purchase very soon.
Yeah. I would tend to think so now. And I think that the market's generally, I would say, finally valuing Garrincha, for, the player that he was. That I think most people definitely put him in the top 20. He basically carried the 62 team.
Yeah.
It's just a fantastic player. So I think he's getting the some of the love and respect that had eluded him, early on, and that was good news to see. And I feel like generally there's just a lot of players that are getting the love, especially in the 1960 to present period.
Yeah. And actually another one that interested me was the 46 or the 40s Di Stefanos, the Montecudines, or however you want to pronounce it. Pretty beaten up, both of them. Surface, by their face. One was very jacked up.
The two was just terrible. Like, you couldn't see his face; it was just mangled.
Yeah.
And what did that one end up going for? Like 3,500?
Yeah, it was like $3,000. And a few months ago, I want to say there was, or maybe within the last 6 months, one sold on PWCC, probably right around that price, maybe a thousand more, but it looked a lot better. So, and even both of them didn't look great. Like, I've had probably 3 of those things go through at least 3, through my possession. And I think actually that the one with the really bad face actually was one of them. But the other ones were so clean. So it's just like, these were like definitely bottom of the barrel of that disc, in my opinion.
I thought the second one was a 4, went for like 7,800 or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one's okay. I mean, at least I'm like, what, that could have gone for even more. I mean, it wasn't terrible. You could see, I was like, for me, when I just calibrated it, okay, 3,500 or whatever for a crap 2 where I can't see his face, or slightly more than double for something that I can at least appreciate his image.
Yeah, that's fair.
I was like, okay, that probably on a relative basis, I'd probably pay more. Well, I would have paid less for the 2, and I probably would have paid a little bit more, for the 4. I did get, I got a number of questions about that, coming up to prior to the auction, about if that is considered as rookie. And, there's a lot of questions about the date on the Vintage Football Soccer Facebook page. We had kind of a long discussion about this, some of the pros and cons, and I would just tell people, in general, I'd say, while not fully proven, I'd say that there's a more of a consensus than not that they were issued over a few years, ranging from probably 1947 to 50 potentially. There's been a lot of matches with magazine advertisements that have those same dates, and then there's 3 different versions of most of the players, which nobody really knows how it was issued, and which years, which ones came first. So I would generally kind of like the Cruyff Vanderhoot, where I generally say, hey, 68 to 70, regardless of what the slab says. For these, I'm kind of in my mind marking them 47 to 50, with a lagging question mark on if there's some discussion of whether those were made in the 70s, or reprinted in the 70s. There's still a little bit of a lagging question there for me. I don't see why they would do that. So I'm gonna err on the side of, or I'm gonna think that these tend to be likely authentic, but there is that question out there that's always nagged at me, and that's why I never accumulated them, hard, because they've always been relatively highly valued, but there's always been a couple of questions around it, like why wasn't that included in the book, Difícil era los de antes? And I haven't talked to Rafael Breton, but some people allegedly have.
Well, I think that I believe that that's a Uruguayan company, so that might be part of the reason why it's not, because it's not an Argentinian issue. So that at least maybe lessens some of the concern in that regard, or lightens maybe that strike. So that's one thing that's working for it. I agree. Like, but every one of them that I bought was from Argentina.
Mhm.
Like, I didn't buy them from Mercado,
Uruguay.
Uruguay. I bought it from Argentina. So, maybe, that's one of the things that's like, huh, why is that, right? Like, why would a company from Uruguay make an Argentinian league issue? Like that's kind of interesting. So yeah, I mean, that's always going to be a topic. I think that we'll never know the answer to it. And so, like, I guess the fact that PSA grades it that way, I think we have to accept that the market's going to believe it is. A 46 to 50 is kind of where I think, like there was like I have probably, my buddy and I bought probably a lot of 40 of them, maybe a decade ago. And I have like, yeah, 3, maybe 4 issues or different versions of the same player. So, but some of them are interesting, like, because it looks like it's the same photo, but it's just zoomed.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of looks almost, I don't want to say pixelated, but there's something that doesn't look, quite right. So, like, I don't know, it almost like, like when you walk close to like a film strip back in the day and everything just kind of looks a little blurry. That's kind of what it looked like to me. But yeah, if I have some gun to my head, I'm gonna say it's probably from that date or that at least range of years. So if that's the case,
they label it as 46, 47, yeah. Right? Or something. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think, there's a lot of time on those discs, but they are important to the hobby.
For sure.
And there's always a ton of questions out there on them. And I just submitted, the one thing that I always thought about on the fakes is that, there's tons of players, hundreds of different players. So like if you were going to fake, wouldn't you just fake good ones? There's a whole bunch of players that don't matter. So that kind of goes in the court of, well, these things were likely legit. I just submitted to PSA a bunch of, other stars, but not, Jan Moreno, Arico, Arsenio Arico, LaBruna. I did a bunch of those.
Me too.
And I'm going to see how they come back. And, they haven't really graded much outside of the Di Stefano. So,
yep.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing. We haven't seen since the boom. We've only seen 4 of those Di Stefanos come out, which to me is kind of interesting because I would used to have seen them more or less the same cadence as the alphas. And now, they've just disappeared. And I don't know if they're in permanent collections or if people were waiting for a price hike. I think now you see $7,000 for it. Some people may say, all right, well, I'll come out and show mine. I don't know, which is kind of what happened with the alpha. As soon as the price started to go, there's one available every couple weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. So we might see that. And, I guess moving back to the Pele's a little bit, like any high grade Pele is going insane, right? Like, I mean, it's those World of Sport ones from 1979. I think it sold for, there was a PSA 10 in the PWCC. I believe it went for like $1,500. I have to scroll to find it, but yeah, it was $1,675 for a PSA 10. 1984 Rothmans PSA 10, $760. So that's after Pele's playing days. And like, so pretty much Pele, like anything that's grading high, it's just insane.
Definitely buying these grades without understanding that you can probably, get a Rothman set for like $15.
Yeah.
Even still today, right? Because those were so overproduced. Like nobody, like when we were collecting, like, no, man, that's like, stay away from that. Right.
Yeah.
So, I think, and this is where, it's to a certain extent, buy what you like. If you really liked it and you are a PSA 10 collector and the premium on PSA 10 is just gone. It's big and it's getting bigger and it's getting bigger like all the time. So, maybe that's the angle that people have. I'm not that guy. I'm not a PSA 10 collector, but clearly there's enough of those people out there that just think it's better to have a Rothman PSA 10 than an ungraded early 1960s sticker, which I would have the higher preference to.
Yes,
all day long.
I agree.
But collect what you like and go after that. And if you aren't, if you want to play the market, a flippers market, there's some angles there because those Rothmans are all over the place and people are willing to pay $700 for them.
Yeah, it's like I remember like there was a place in England I was buying sets from, and they had them listed. I think that it was £10 a set, and it's like I didn't even think about buying them. Like it was just that's how ridiculous. It just seemed like why would I buy that? But it had Maradona in it too, so like I mean, just those two probably. Now I'm regretting it, of course, but like I mean, that's. It just never even crossed my mind. I'm like, this is after Pele's playing days. Why would people want that? But yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just a way that somebody's collecting. And, hey, more power to you, I guess. But leave the junkers to me then.
Yeah. Well, I think, back to some of the things that the theme of broadness, right? When I don't know if you had saw the Roberto Carlos, PSA 5, which is a good grade for that card because most of them I think are 2, 3, 4, so 5 on a relative basis is still pretty good, and it sold for like $700, and it's a second year card. Now, of course, it had rookie in the sticker. I mean, in the title, which may have gotten an well, I mean, it's technically this rookie card, so I think, right, the 93 is a sticker, right? Well, anyway, the point is, I just think I was like, wow, that's a pretty big price for that card, and I think you probably, a couple months ago, just like everything else, you could probably get that $150. So it was nice to see this broadening of players, not just the big names. The Roger Mila rookie sold for $600. That shocked me. Like that was one that I actually thought I may have a chance on.
Yeah.
And I bid like 300 plus or something and blown out of the water. So that's great to see. Even the relatively, now we know the Zico, ping pong happens to be, pretty common-ish, and to see a 4 go for 300 plus, that was kind of a good market signal to me that, things that I think most people now will know that the ping pong isn't his rookie, like when we started 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. But, and so to see a second, third, fourth year, card going for, in a PSA 4 going for $300, I think is good for the hobby, for the long run, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like people are becoming more aware about the South American cards and just the fact that they're not, necessarily always going to be in great condition, and just the rarity of even acquiring them and the difficulty of acquiring them. So I think we saw that across the board. Even like that, the Maradona authentic disc. I mean, like that went for $4,000
or something. That was $4,000, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that, as far as authentics go, it looked okay. Right.
Yeah. So, it looked like somebody cut it. Like they basically, did a trim.
Yeah. Just a tiny trim. It wasn't like, it wasn't completely annoying, right? So, but still $4,000 is a pretty big price to my eyes on an authentic one, and the Platini also had to destroyed back and sold for like $850, right?
Yep, $850. Yep.
So I think you're looking at some of these, cards that, when we first started, nobody would even take those because they were X album and they had the backs and everybody wanted a clean one. Now to see those things bringing in nearly $1,000 with the thrash back is really good for the hobby, because what it means is that people accept stickers.
Yep.
Know that a lot of them are going to be X album, and they live with it because of the scarcity. And I think that's generally a huge theme, because it's very important that people get comfortable. If soccer is going to boom, you're going to have to get comfortable that a huge part of the supply is going to be X album.
Yep. And
right?
Just the awareness of the market to know that, like, that's the positive sign. It means that people are at least, definitely more educated even than they were 3 months ago. And that's a great sign. And I think everybody's just racing to get anything at the moment too.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some of that going on. Right.
Let's see. There was that looked like somebody took a bite out of that Maradona.
Yeah.
PSA 1 went for $700.
I mean, I think that was close to not even being gradable because so much of the card was lost.
I agree.
So I mean, at some point they say there's not enough of the card. I've had that, a few times, and they're like, okay, so you're getting back your piece. So yeah, I think that was pretty healthy. And then the better one of that was that the Torres, or I forget, but it sold for like $4,000. It was like a 3.5 or something, which was, I think pretty healthy. I mean, it didn't have the explosive growth that we saw. I mean, Maradona was a case where we saw a jump after his passing anyway. That was kind of so there wasn't like this huge jump on top of that jump that we've been seeing, from some of the other players. At the same time, I think it was a healthy print on that transaction. And I thought it was a nice Lions made set, like all across it, all the stars. I've always told people that first of all, I like the photography on it. I like the layout, and it was pretty high grade for how those cards usually are. But I thought they also came at pretty hefty pricing, given how, relatively common they are from the early 70s.
Yeah, they were always like ones that people kind of, they were like almost like the Venerlandis or the, the Rothmans of that era, or kind of the, was it the Nabiscos from back then? Like all of those kind of from the early 70s were just a little, people just didn't really take a big interest in them. And
because they were so common, right?
Correct. Yes.
They were just it was just like, okay, another one of these. That's like the only thing you can find,
every early Cruyff, it ended up being like that one, it wasn't like what we're looking for.
Yeah. So, but to see, I think the Pele here went for 1,300 and a 9. Now 9's got to be the top grade. Maybe I have like a 6 or a 7 or something, but to see that go for more than $1,000 is a bit, shocking to me. It shouldn't be, because it's an early 1970. I'd rather pay that. I think that's a better buy than the Rothman.
Agreed.
But the explosion of the sticker, I'm looking at this now, 7,100, and that was a PSA 8. And now it is the multi-language, which is, to my eyes, a more scarce, issue. The green's the most common. Then I'd say that the Bis Valida, and then I think the rarest is the multi-language. But again, I don't have any stats to prove that, so you can go to Last Sticker or something and check around. But that's just my general feel on the market. But that was a big price. I was not expecting that. I expected that one to go, somewhere in the 2 to 3 range.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know I don't know if I should take that as it's a Pele and it's Pele's first, World Cup Panini card or sticker, or do I take that as a sign that the set is starting to draw more, like interest? And I mean, I think that it's probably a little bit of both, but I still think it's Pele driving that more than it is the 70s set as of now. But I think that we could see it headed that way. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I think it's mostly Pele, but there is a little bit of respect for that set. And I do think that set is going to garner more respect in time. that was one of the ones in the last PWCC that I picked up was the Mueller, and it was an 8, I think, and it was like probably what $300-400, which would have been a lot for that card, back then. But I actually think that right now you get any stars from that, and then just fast forward the 74. If you can get a Cruyff, get a Cruyff. The Zico 78, did really well. I think that was like $400, and that's a World Cup sticker. So I think you're starting to their first World Cup sticker, in the Panini, presentation, unstuck, looks to be a place getting some respect in the market beyond just the Pele respect.
Yep, that makes sense. So just I wanted to address something in the chat. L Basic was saying that he'd take a PSA 1 any day for anything highly regarded as vintage or in vintage. And yeah, I agree with that. I just meant like, the one that got a chunk out of it, it's almost like it shouldn't have been a 1. It should have been more of like an authentic at best. But, hey, they got a guy on the, that got out of bed in the right on the right side of the bed. So
yeah, I mean, all this. I do appreciate the low grade stuff. Look at the Cruyff, the 60, the Vanderhoots, the 60. What I'm always going to call them, 68 to 70s, right? Okay, I think they call them 69s on the PSA holders.
Yeah,
the 2 went for 2,600. And the 3 went for 1,900. Now, I know you can look at it. The 2 has the exceptional, the E from PWCC, PWCC, like it's excellent for a 2. Okay, and I think actually these are both very fine copies. And I'm happy to see that sticker get some respect. Because I do think it has long deserved it, and unstuck ones are incredibly elusive. So just getting used to the fact that these are these are going to be X album, and this is what I'm going to pay because it is an early sticker for him. I love to see that. Now, why the 2 traded 30% more than the 3, that does make me feel a little funky, because I didn't see the 3 as being terrible. The 2 was nice, but I didn't see the 3 as being terrible. So that was one of the anomalies. Maybe people just in their bidding are like, hey, I can't bid on everything, and I prefer the 2. And the way that these work, they all close at the same time, basically. So you can't be smart about, oh shit, this one, let me try to get the 3. The bids are already in, right?
Yeah, you're not like evaluating and analyzing during that auction end, because it's so fast, and there's just no way you'd even be able to react that quickly. So yeah.
What did you think of the best, PSA 4 going for 3,800?
Yeah, that was actually going to be the next thing I brought up. And that's a lower grade of all of them that have been graded. So that's a great sign for best in general. I think that's okay though. I don't think it's like crazy. Like, I don't think it's, I think getting a decent copy, like for that price, I think that's what you're going to have to pay now. And I think that, like it's his only rookie card, right? Like, that's his only one from that year. So if you're looking for a 64 best, that's your only choice. And there are not a ton of them out there. So, they're available, but they're not readily available. Like, we see them pop up, once a month now, maybe?
Yeah. And I think that when Steve got that ungraded copy for like 1,200 with the chocolate or whatever, the marking on the back, I'm like, you're going to be super happy with that. And this one, while it's true that this card tends to grade higher, it's a UK card, so they take care of them, better. If you look at the pop reports, there's a couple 9s, a number of 8s, 7s. So you have good cards available in the market, not a ton. I think this is actually going to end up being a big bargain. 4,000 for the best, for all those reasons. It's the only rookie he has. if you even get slightly deep in soccer history, which clearly lots of people are, you're going to run into him super quickly, right? So if you didn't know about him, he's got a huge following in the UK. He's like a rock star. So he's got cultural stuff. Yeah. What's going on?
No, I
Oh
was
yeah,
just pointing.
he's right there on your wall. Yeah, yeah, there you go. So he's an icon. He's the bad boy. So I think I think that's going to end up being a really good buy, even if I wasn't willing to go there yet.
Yeah, and that's probably. I mean, you have copies of this card or a copy of the card. You have some of that best card,
Yeah, I have. Yeah. I have
a handful,
probably.
whatever. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably. I don't know, 5, maybe 6 or
yeah.
something.
So like, you're going to be less apt to go be aggressive at something like that. So yeah, I mean, but if you want something that's of decent grade of one of these top, 20 guys, you're just going to have to pay that.
So if I was a fan, see that would have been one that I would have stretched for if I was a best fan.
Mm,
The ones that we've seen come out recently have been ungraded, and that can be a huge payoff if you get a nice ungraded one, but it's also a risk, right? So,
I, I sold a raw one that was pretty jacked, probably a month ago, maybe 2 months, month and a half ago, for like $800 or $750 or something. And so like just taking, that price, which is going to definitely grade a 1, you know what I mean? A 4 for $4,000 isn't bad. And
yeah, and this is post euphoria, right?
yeah,
Everything else kind of like on a relative basis. I looked at this and said, okay, I like the 66 Sicker, Verlag Pele in a PSA 8 because you never find them that nice. So it got a PSA 8 and it trades for 3,600. And then I've got the best rookie in a 4. I'm going to go with the best rookie, in a 4 instead of the Pele, which is an 8. But again, I think the general market tends to value grades,
yeah,
like at a huge, premium. So it's not that I think that 8 is, not a bad purchase. I mean, a bad purchase because it's the market values grades and it's amazing grade and super hard to get in that grade. But the collector in me is like, man, go for the true rookie of another, superstar. If I only have $4,000 to spend on the auction.
Yeah, that's a good place to put that money. So I'm just gonna bounce with a few of these comments.
Sure.
So Pip says, "Have no luck finding anything in the 80s or 90s, even ungraded that they want to key on." And so that's just showing you even more current eras, like it's just getting tough. Like everything's getting eaten up. And we mentioned this a month ago. We mentioned this 2 months ago that particular era was a little less tapped than other eras, and so disregard. It's apparently tapped now. So yeah, just it's really gonna take like what I feel like part of my skill set is finding stuff that's kind of hidden, that maybe people can't find. It's not readily out there. And I think that that's going to be a skill that's going to be really important moving forward because everybody's looking for the same stuff. And, I think that, being able to find these things in hidden places is going to be the advantage. And, so just working on that skill set for any of you guys listening, learn to search a certain way, figure out ways to find things. Like that's maybe not just the ABC of putting the year, the brand, the name in and hoping to hit. You got to do some,
creative searching.
Yes, exactly. Some tinkering.
Yeah.
Suarez 53s. Those were,
That was big.
Yes, promising. That made me happy. It was just nice to see that, like, he's not a guy that I consider, forefront for when people are starting to collect. even Spanish players, like players from Spain, you know, that played in Spain. And you know, it was nice to see like the Turmo 6 went for like 600. The SGC 8 went for 1140. So I mean, those are traditionally in pretty good shape, those cards. But like an 8, I don't think that is very common. Like I think that that's a great acquisition for the buyer.
Very, 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 very uncommon. You know, I think that, you know, maybe my highest is a 7, and I probably had 20 of them. Right. I could be wrong on that, but that's just my feeling. You know, the other thing that kind of shocked me, you know, when we're talking about relatively high grades for the issue, the Bulgarian Sport Sindelar sold for $530 and at 6.5. Now 6.5 is a big grade for that card, but it was that surprised me a bit. You know, that it went that. I mean, I was hoping to get it, you know, but again, this is another case where I bid, you know, more than half. I was 360 or something, right? But I didn't think it was going to go for more than 500. And you know, he's getting out there. His name's now. I'd say he's on most people who are doing pre-wars lists now.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, he's on a top 10 list pre-war, no doubt.
And I wonder how much we have to do with some, you know, him being on some of these lists or some of these other guys. You know, because I also notice, you know, Dixie Dean's pretty broad in his appeal. You know, Stanley Matthews is pretty broad in his appeal. Now, although there's plenty of 1930s, you know, cards for both of them that aren't super, you know, expensive. But you know, I think that now those are almost common players that people are looking for, which I think is good, because if you're going to bet on pre-war, you're going to need some anchors in the pre-war era that people go back and they see those, and then you tend to splinter from there, right? And learn about more other players, you know, that are also maybe as elite, but just not as well known. So, you know, I feel like in the pre-war between, you know, Meredith, Bloomers, you know, Sindelar, Matthews, Dixie Dean, I think all this stuff is really solidifying in the pre-war. And then the next tier, you know, I think you'll see, you know, a little bit more love. You know, the Ricardo Zamora Bulgarian guys 70, and that so on a relative basis, he's probably just as important. You know, for the history of the sport, and one of the best goalkeepers of all time. And you had a same issue as Sindelar in a 5, and it only goes for $70. And so I think going to end up being a big bargain, you know, one of the bargains of this auction.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's that's really late in his career. So that's another reason that it probably didn't pull the money that like the Sindelar does. Like the Sindelar, that's like what, sixth year, whereas like Zamora, that's probably like his 11th or 12th year. And so I mean,
and the Bulgarian sports are kind of like the Lions Maids of the 1930s, right?
Yep.
They were common. Now you can still get them, but they're just not as common anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, and so I think that all of us older time collectors are like, hey, it's just another Bulgarian sport, right? So, you know, what the hell? But it is, you know, for new collectors coming in, I think it's a great place to start. Still economical,
for sure. Yeah.
Names of the players, right? So,
yep. All right. Thoughts on Tati's final auction price, or Toti? I can't remember what it went for, honestly.
Yeah, I think I may have to search that up. Because I thought it was a high. I remember just thinking, oh, that seemed high. Let me see if I can find it, or if you can find it.
Yeah, I'll look it up. But let me go to the next thing. Well, okay. Can you tell me whether Jimmy Greaves is underappreciated and one day will get the love he deserves? So, like, go ahead and answer that. I'll look up Toti.
Yeah, so I do. I really do think so because I mean, a prolific goal scorer, right? They usually get credit in the market, and for whatever reason, I feel like he doesn't get the credit certainly on a value from a value perspective. I mean, he's not Bobby Charlton, right? But he is kind of up there, and I've never fully understood the gigantic discount he appears to have in the market. So I would say yes, of the players that are in the late 50s and early 60s, I would be picking some of those. In fact, I have been picking some of those up exactly for that reason, because I just think that he's gotten no love, and it seems like occasionally people will learn about a player, or there'll be some catalysts, and then a whole bunch of people will go into it, and it'll have a relatively big jump. And for him, he's completely under the radar right now.
Yep, I agree. I think is it simple enough to say that it's just a Man United marketing thing that's causing the huge,
Difference.
rift between the two of those? Like I agree. Like it doesn't make sense how big of a difference it is between the two players. So yeah, totally worth a goodbye. So yeah, the 94 Calciatore PSA 9 went for $22.75.
Yeah, that feels high, but it's a PSA 9, right? So
yeah,
and I think that the market's telling us right now that you want the high. It's got to be the highest rated, right? So
yeah. If you guys all weren't filling out your PSA forms, I'd be able to look that up right now. But
yeah. So I think it feels high, but like it's. I don't know the next time you'll see a 9. I don't recall the last time I saw one. And if things continue to progress, then you can look smart by overpaying now and letting the market continue to rise. I think that will be a sticker that people will want to have in their collections if they are of the 30s to 40 ages. I think that a lot of people are just going to remember him and want to own that sticker, and it's so next to impossible to get 10. So I don't think it's a terrible I don't think it's a terrible buy. I think it's a little ahead of market right now, but
that's what you got to do.
What you got to do. And if he's on your list and you want high grade, I'm not going to fault anybody for reaching on that.
Yeah, and I'm looking, and there's like maybe a handful that sold raw, and they go for between 100 to 300 range. So a couple of those were after the PSA 9 sold, around 200 to 300 range. So I mean, just getting the rare grade, that's where that premium is for sure.
And there were at least two people willing to pay over, to pay $2,000 plus. So, so I think that's also another, not to say we validate the craziness, but I think that solid player, rookie sticker, people are going to be on most people's want list, highest grade. I think it checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, I agree. And there was a follow-up to the Greaves. Thoughts on the Bobby Charlton Cadet Suite auction. Last minute was pretty fire. It went up to like $450 for a PSA 8. That's kind of market. So that didn't really stun me, the price. I had just sold one for $500. So it didn't really, I was actually surprised it didn't go for a little bit more, but people are just focused on so many other things that I get it. And, that's a little bit more of an accessible card compared to a lot of these other ones. So people are going with the items that they believe are scarcer, and, that's going to catch up. Like that cadet is going to go up in price just because at some point that's going to be the only thing people can buy, you know? So like that's kind of where I am with that. So most of the cadets are a hold for me. Unless you want to move it into something else, you know, I get that too.
Yeah.
Trying to see if there was anything else that kind of like caught my eye in the auction. I mean, that 55 Vecchi Julinho went for like 350 PSA 2.
That surprises me.
Yeah, like that's a hefty price for that. And 335 PSA 2, and he's not a top name from that set. So South American rarity, difficult to get decent grades. It looks pretty clean. People are paying up for it. I mean, you think that's it?
You know, shit. I sold one of those last month or something for like $80. And I thought, you know, that was fine. It was probably a 1.5 or something. So I do think people are starting to realize that it's just the rare. I think also some people are putting maybe a little too much focus on the pop reports, thinking that, you know, I would just caution everyone on the pop reports. I mean, so little soccer has been graded.
Yeah.
And there are a lot more of these things out there. And that's why I'd be very hesitant to paying super premiums for the highest graded cards, unless you know the specifics of the cards and how difficult it is to get in a grade. So not all a Cadet Suites 8 is very different from a Vecchi 8.
Yes.
Right? You know, I mean, which don't exist.
Yes.
So you know, a 5, you know, Maradona 78, you know, crack is highest or second best highest, you know. So you really need to take the pops and the grades with a grain of salt and not base your strategy on that, because very few people graded soccer cards. There's a bunch sitting at PSA. There's a bunch going to be on the way. I think most of us tonight are shipping stuff tomorrow, right? So, you know, they're going to increase, and just don't, my caution would be not to way overpay just for the highest rated things at this point in time, because we're early days in the soccer card grading.
Yep, I agree. I think that, you know, there's at least a level of confidence, because most really high grades for particularly rare issue, and that's where you need to be educated about it, is like most of those are probably graded, or a large percentage of those are probably graded. Because if you and I had like an incredible condition rare card, we submitted it at some point, and that's probably the same case with most, at least American collectors. But yeah, like there's so many things, especially like stuff from the 80s, 90s, and it's from Europe. That's not something I'm going to be super confident in paying a real high premium on. You know, that's, I think, where you just kind of have to case by case it, like Al had mentioned earlier, and just critically think about each individually. It's just not a number. That numbers mean different for each issue.
Yeah, and if you have some specific questions, join the premium part of the Discord and ask us, because I mean, the reality is it does take a lot of experience, and if you can make some mistakes by applying your assumptions that work in other sports, or that generally work throughout, you know, the industry, that, you know, soccer is fraught with a lot of, you know, still a ton of possibilities and a lot of opportunities, but there's a lot of pitfalls, from bad slabs, you know, with the wrong, you know, names, to disagreements, to, you know, things may look not that common on the pop report, but, you know, actually are much more common than you think, to, you know, things that are exceedingly rare, you know, needing to know that this is the time, you know, when you see something, if you're after it, that this is the time you need to go for it. So yeah, I think it's a fascinating, you know, market. I'm really happy with, you know, the broad-based, you know, thing happening, you know, generally across the board. Slightly concerned that things are kind of beyond where I'm willing to go, because I've never had that in my soccer collecting history. Slightly concerned that I'm now more of a seller than a buyer, which just fundamentally is a big shift for me, because that's not how I traditionally go about it. And those are two little kind of warning signs on the on the market in certain areas. But relative to the other sports, I can't believe I'm hopping over and looking at some stuff that's still going on. Like, it's even worse in other areas of the card market, and it's blowing my mind.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we kind of have to, like, this is like a thing that probably in life is a life lesson, like perspective, right? Like, you just got to take a step back and look at the whole picture sometimes that you don't necessarily have. And, we're so focused on soccer. And so, yeah, you talking about looking at these other sports, that gives you a little bit bigger, a little bit better perspective. I feel like you're right. Like, this is crazy, like, for where where we're at compared to where we were. Do I feel like it's inordinately crazy? Probably not. I think that, we've said this all along, that we're way more insulated than any other sport because the demand just hasn't been there, and it's starting to get there. So, and it's not even close to where it will be. So, like, all of those things, I think that there are things that are inflated and are overinflated, and those are the things you got to pick out. Like, what is it?
Yeah, the vast majority of the things are still like, I'm just looking through and I'm like, okay, where will someone get hurt?
Yeah.
In the stuff. And the reality is there's not many that I think would get hurt, even at the prices, from yesterday. And I think there's a number of them that have considerable opportunities, still, left in them. So, I'm still optimistic, right? But it's just harder for me to get all the way out to these levels right now and continuing to add.
Yep.
Especially when, and I think correctly, like you point out that not most of the people listening are probably in the same situation. It's like, do I really want to stretch for my 7th George Best rookie? Okay. That's
right.
So there's no, so I think that
your drive is different.
Yeah. Like, so I get diminishing returns, right? So but I do understand, and I think that card's going to be great. Whoever, got it, why you would want to stretch for that. Cause if I didn't have one, I would have stretched for it. Right. So I think I'm in a different place of my collecting, and I wouldn't use the fact that I'm not buying that much as like a barometer for most, because, I think I had maybe not the grades, but I had every card that I bid on yesterday. So it wasn't like there's something new that I needed to have. It was just like, I like the card. I think it has a future, and I'll pay this price.
Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, you and I are going to have a little bit of a different perspective for the most part, just because of our history and our, we do have an already established collection. And so, yeah, we're not stretching for stuff because we're like, oh, I already got it, and that sort of thing. So, like, totally get you guys buying it. I don't think that you buying it is a bad thing. Like, I think it's a good thing. Like, I think that, these prices are still not where they're going to end up. And, like, there's still so many other areas that haven't even been attacked yet. And, we'll leave that for another show. Is there anything else that you wanted to cover, Al? I didn't really see anything else.
Yeah, let's see what happens in Golden here. There's a few things going on, and then just one comment about Modern. I think the way the Mbappe's crash after the Euros for a few months, and then have suddenly just turned right around and like exceeded where they went. That was a little bit shocking. Some of the inserts, like the Galactics, I thought did pretty well. For being BGS 9s, there's some Ronaldos, there was a Messi, I think, that also was there. And just Prism, looks to have made at least to a certain extent a recovery. Which I think is good for soccer in general, because that's a brand that people follow closely, and having it do well. I still don't get it, completely. I have a couple Prism, cards, but certainly on that the Messi Ronaldo one going for 24 grand isn't where I would have put my money, but it is healthy to have people in modern, who ultimately some of those people will take an interest in vintage. So I think it's all good. I don't have a ton of bad things to say. I just went right through all this stuff, and I think you fast forward 3, 5, 6 years, you're probably going to be really happy with all of the stuff buying at these prices.
Yep, I agree. I think that as I think in a few years you'll be ecstatic. Honestly, like we're not going to see what we saw this last 3 months, that clip of appreciation, but I think we're going to see a pretty good percentage of people joining vintage, consistently, and I think that that's going to be super healthy for the hobby, and I think that I have no problem buying now. Like, I mean, it's just a matter of what I'm buying. That's changed, but
and you have to be a little bit more careful, right? Because you don't have
yes.
unlimited funds, so you need to pick and choose, more carefully, than before. Like, if back in the day, the most expensive thing is like $100. So it wasn't even if you get something and it has like a nick on the corner or on the surface, you're like, okay, well, no big deal. I think you need to be, if you're buying raw stickers on Todo Colección from Spain and you're paying $300 in hopes that it's a 10, you're probably not that's not a great business plan.
Correct.
It's different when you're buying them for €3, right? So I do think that we're going to need to, people need to be careful, be disciplined, and work a little harder, and be, like you say, find the right ways to search certain things. We've given away lots of secrets on where to find stuff like Todo Colección or Tradera or other places that we talked about, Mercado Libre. We now I think everybody knows where to go. It's just how to find the stuff that you're looking for. And we are here to help as well.
Yep. So on that note, appreciate you guys joining us. We're an hour and 15 minutes almost in. Again, we're going to start a premium channel on the Discord. If you are not a member, there's a link down below. And joining the Discord, great community, a lot of knowledgeable people. Everybody, there's people that have different expertises. So most people can help out on certain areas. And then if you want to have full access, not full access, but priority access to Al and I, we're doing a premium channel for $20 a month, or if you buy a year, you get 2 months free. And I'll put a link down below in the description, and I'll also post it in the Discord for all of you that are already members. So, Al, appreciate your time again, man. I always love talking with you, my man.
Yeah, likewise. Yeah, let's see what the next month holds. I can pretty much guarantee you it's not going to be as crazy as this last 30 days, but you never know.
Yeah. Let's. I hope it is. Although might give us something different to talk about if it's just not, wow, this is insane. Like the same comment every time. But thanks again, everybody. Truly appreciate you guys watching. Making time to listen to two old guys babble about soccer. So talk to you guys soon.